Hi guy, welcome back CBS Beyond the Gates spoilers. Fairmont Crest always has its own way of making every fracture look like a carefully hidden detail. Beneath warm lights and perfectly trimmed hedges, people pass through the security gates, see the grass so green it feels unreal, hear the delicate clink of crystal glasses at poolside gatherings, and convince themselves this place is built only for success stories, polished marriages, and smiles that never falter. But Nicole knows that sheen is just a surface coat, and anyone who gets close enough can scratch straight through it. Because her life, lately, no longer feels like a string of coincidences. It feels like an organized collapse, divorcing Ted, severing an entire shared history, and forcing herself to relearn how to breathe when she no longer hears his footsteps in the hallway. Each morning, the pain doesn't arrive like an explosion. It comes steadily, relentlessly, like a fine rain that never stops, chilling the skin little by little until you mistake numbness for healing. Nicole finds herself walking a razor-thin line. On one side, grief that stretches too long, and on the other, rebellion as a survival reflex. And in that state, she steps into something with Carlton not as a shallow replacement, but as proof that she still has the right to choose, still has the ability to begin again, still deserves a version of love that doesn't crush the air from her lungs. Carlton enters Nicole's life at the exact moment she needs space that isn't filled with divorce paperwork, legal calls, and nights where silence becomes a sound all its own. He doesn't carry himself like a man trying to win a competition, and he doesn't act as though he's fighting Ted for some trophy. Carlton's calm feels like a warm coat after a storm, quiet, not performative, but enough to make Nicole believe she is not completely exposed anymore. Their time together carries a different kind of breath, lighter, softer, less tense, less haunted by history. With Carlton, Nicole doesn't have to be a perfect wife, doesn't have to swallow anger to keep a marriage-looking painting intact for the world to admire. She only has to be herself, still cracked, still uncertain, still terrified she might hand her heart to the wrong person again. But peace never survives untouched in Fairmont Crest. Here, every road can lead to an encounter you didn't prepare for. Every corner can become fate's trap, and every harmless outing can turn into a confrontation that rips open everything you've tried to keep sealed. Nicole's awkward run-in with Ted happens in the cruelest way, perfectly timed to sting. She is out with Carlton, trying to let her mind drift away from signatures and settlements, trying to prove to herself that she deserves something joyful, even if it's only a small slice of it. And then Ted appears, like a blunt reminder that her past is not finished with her. It takes no words, just the way Ted stills for the briefest beat, the way his eyes land on her, and Nicole feels her chest tighten. It isn't even heartbreak in the simple sense of still loving him. It is the sharp pain of self-respect being touched, the jolt of memory being dragged backward, the humiliation of feeling watched at her weakest moment. And the worst part is she can't tell who is more uncomfortabler, the woman trying to prove she has moved on, or Ted, the man forced to stare straight at the reality that their marriage is truly beyond rescue. Ted is not a man who accepts loss easily, whether it's a personal defeat or a crack in the life he built to look unshakable. He carries the instinct to control, the belief that if he holds tightly enough, nothing can slip away. Divorcing Nicole makes him feel as if he's losing a part of his own image, the stable man, the respectable family, the structured life. But that structure now feels like a wall someone drilled a small hole into, and the damage is spreading no matter how hard he pretends it isn't. Seeing Nicole beside Carlton shows him a version of her he once believed belonged to him, poised, upright, looking at the world as though she no longer needs his permission to exist. He hates that feeling, not because it's simple jealousy, but because it reminds him Nicole can live without him. And in that moment, something dangerous wakes up inside him. He wants to prove she is still affected by him. Ted's eyes turn unreadable, caught between grief, defense, and a stubborn need to avoid looking like the man who lost. Nicole doesn't feel victorious. She feels tangled. Carlton stands beside her, but Nicole still hears the echo of old years running through her mind like a film. She can't shut off. She wants to be calm. She wants to prove she is fine, that divorce didn't break her, that she can open her heart to someone else without constantly turning back. But Ted is there, and Fairmont Crest is there, and the invisible eyes of their elite community are always there, ready to judge how she handles herself and assign a score to her dignity. The awkwardness is not just between three people. It's between Nicole and an entire system of evaluation that has clung to her for years. And inside her, rebellion begins to resonate as recklessness, but as defiance. If they want to see her stumble, she refuses to give them the satisfaction. If they want to see her crumble, she straightens her spine even more. The encounter ends quickly, but its shadow doesn't. It clings to Nicole like perfume caught in fabric, light but stubborn, making it impossible to dismiss it as a random moment. She goes home, but her mind stays unsettled. She begins asking questions that loop endlessly. What does Ted actually want? Is he hurting because he lost her, or does he simply hate that she is walking away? Does he regret anything, or has he been waiting for freedom all along? Those questions pull Nicole into a spiral where she wants to scream and laugh bitterly at the same time. It's the kind of emotional conflict that only exists when you've been wounded. Yet you're forcing yourself to look strong. And while Nicole is trying not to be devoured by her own past, Ted is being pulled into something new that makes everything even messier. Shanice. On New Year's Eve, in an atmosphere filled with celebrations and fireworks, Ted shares his first kiss with Shanice. It isn't a public spectacle, but it is a moment that cannot be reversed. Once it happens, every distance becomes pretend, every glance gains weight. Every accidental touch feels like an unspoken promise. Ted can't deny that Shanice gives him something he lost in his marriage. The feeling of being seen as a man who is still desirable, still wanted, still capable of starting over without carrying the entire burden of history. Yet that attraction also frightens him. He fears being labeled a cheater, fears being judged, fears his divorce turning into a public trial where he plays the villain. Ted doesn't want to be cast as the man who betrayed Nicole before the ink on their separation even dries. Even though he knows Fairmont Crest doesn't require facts, only a story people are willing to believe, Shanice doesn't step into this with the same fear Ted carries. She has her own reasons, her own motives, and she understands what standing beside Ted will cost. She isn't naive. She knows this community feeds on rumors. That one blurry photo or one misread glance can turn into a scandal that stains a reputation overnight. But Shanice still moves forward, because there are moments she feels she has spent too long watching other people live bigger stories while she stayed on the margins. She looks at Ted and sees a man hollowed out by loss, stripped of something he once relied on. And on some level, Shanice is drawn to the idea of being the person who can reshape him, not out of ambition for power, but out of the craving to matter deeply in someone else's life. It's not just the desire to love, it's the desire to leave a mark. It is Shanice who encourages Ted to find a new place to live. The advice sounds practical and reasonable on the surface, but it holds sharper implications beneath. A new home means leaving behind Nicole's shadow, leaving behind corners of a house that still carry marriage memories, leaving behind habits that keep Ted trapped. It also means choosing a direction where Nicole no longer exists. Shanice doesn't need to push with dramatic words. Her presence alone makes Ted feel he has permission to escape guilt. And in Fairmont Crest, even a decision like moving out can become fuel for gossip and judgment. Who left, who stayed, who abandoned, who was abandoned. Ted is stuck between Shanice's push and the ghost of Nicole. He doesn't want to see himself as disloyal, but he also can't bear living inside a space that reminds him of failure. He tells himself this move is necessary for his future, for stability, for closing a chapter. But he knows, deeper down, it's also an escape from pain he isn't brave enough to face. Ted can sit through divorce discussions and legal negotiations like a man handling business. Yet he becomes fragile when forced to look at the truth that he hurt a woman so badly she stopped fighting. Ted doesn't know if Nicole still aches, but he knows she is different now. And that difference unsettles him because it steals away his final illusion of control. While Ted and Shanice quietly drift closer, Leslie ignites like a flame catching wind. Leslie does not share. She does not step aside. She does not tolerate being left behind in a race she believes she has waited too long to win. Leslie still has feelings for Ted, and it isn't the kind of attachment that vanishes just because circumstances shift. For Leslie, Ted is not merely a man. He has become a symbol of her own worth, her right to be chosen, her hunger to win. When Nicole begins divorcing Ted, when space opens up between them, Leslie sees opportunity. An opportunity she believes belongs to her, as if fate owes her this moment. But Shanice blocks it in a way Leslie cannot swallow. Leslie looks at Shanice and sees more than a rival. She sees a threat to her identity. Because Shanice approaches Ted with a steadiness that drives Leslie insane. Leslie wants her opponents to flinch, to fear her, to retreat when she steps forward. But Shanice does not retreat. And in Fairmont Crest, refusing to retreat can be interpreted as a challenge. Leslie cannot endure the idea that Ted might choose Shanice, because it would mean Leslie is no longer special. She has poured too much hope, too much obsession, and too much pride into the belief that one day Ted would finally see her. Now Ted is seeing someone else, and Leslie feels slapped by reality. Leslie's anger becomes more than an emotion. It becomes a force that carries every moment she waited outside someone else's happiness. Every time she felt she deserved more than she was given, every insecurity she hid behind a smile. Leslie confronts Shanice not to ask questions but to declare territory. In Leslie's mind, Ted is land she has claimed through longing and Shanice is the intruder. Leslie doesn't care what people call her. She cares that she cannot allow Ted to slip away now that Nicole has stepped back. She has waited long enough. Now she wants to take. But Shanice is not easily intimidated. She understands the territorial game Leslie is playing and knows that if she gives even a single inch, Leslie will take 10. Shanice doesn't need to scream or create a public scene. She only needs to hold her position, silently declaring she will not be removed from this story through sheer aggression. That steadiness enrages Leslie even more. Leslie wants panic. She wants trembling. But she gets none. And when Leslie doesn't get the reaction she demands, she finds another path: exposure, destruction, humiliation. Leslie becomes determined to uncover the true face and deceptive schemes between Ted and Shanice. Not because she suddenly cares about morality, but because she needs a righteous excuse to tear them apart. The most dangerous thing about Leslie is that she does not attack with emotion alone. She attacks with strategy. Leslie understands that in Fairmont Crest, truth matters less than the story people repeat. If she can make the community believe Ted and Shanice have an agenda, that their connection is dishonest, that Shanice is taking advantage of Ted while he is vulnerable, then Leslie can destroy them and still paint herself as the wounded party. Once Leslie chooses that role, she commits completely. She will study every hesitation in Ted, every moment Shanice pushes too hard, every tiny misstep between them, and twist it into evidence. Leslie's rebellion is not only aimed at Shanice, it is also aimed at Ted, as punishment for not choosing her sooner. As Leslie builds her battlefield, Nicole enters a different phase. Her rebellion is no longer only a defensive reflex. It becomes real fury as she begins to feel betrayed. Nicole is divorcing Ted, yes, but divorce doesn't erase the fact that she was his wife, that she stood beside him through years that mattered. She can choose to walk away, but she cannot tolerate being made a fool. Nicole's sense of betrayal isn't only about Ted kissing Shanice on New Year's Eve. It's about what that kiss forces her to realize. Perhaps Ted had been leaving her long before she admitted it. Perhaps the gaps in their marriage were not only caused by exhaustion or pressure. Perhaps Ted had already found something elsewhere that he no longer looked for in Nicole. Nicole cannot stand the idea of being replaced so quickly. She may be dating Carlton, but she hates the thought that Ted gets to move on without paying the price. Part of Nicole still wants to believe Ted will suffer, will regret, will feel what he lost. Seeing Ted with Shanice doesn't just look like a new relationship. It looks like a conclusion to rebuilding his life, as though Nicole's role in it can be erased. That realization makes Nicole furious and hollow at once, because it threatens to prove she held onto something that never truly held her back. Nicole's rebellion becomes less about proving she is fine and more about refusing to stay silent. She doesn't want to be seen as a victim, but she also refuses to be labeled the loser. If Ted can step into something new with Shanice, if Leslie can fight for him like he's a trophy, then Nicole will not sit still as the quiet observer. But Nicole is not fighting to win Ted back. Nicole is fighting to reclaim herself. And sometimes reclaiming yourself requires breaking the very things you once protected. Nicole begins to re-examine every sacrifice, every swallowed anger, every time she made herself small to keep the marriage smooth. Now those sacrifices turn into fuel for rage. She feels used by her own belief that family must always be preserved. And Ted, in the way he moves forward, proves that she was preserving something that did not preserve her. Carlton becomes a mirror in the middle of all this. He doesn't create Nicole's pain, but he witnesses it. Nicole wants to lean into him and also fears that leaning too hard will turn her into someone who needs another person just to survive. Carlton gives her comfort, but he also forces her to face an unsettling truth. She has been defined by Ted for so long that even in new love, she still compares. Nicole does not want Carlton to become a tool for revenge, but she cannot deny that Ted's discomfort gives her a strange flash of power. It feels like temporary anesthesia watching Ted forced to see her with someone else. Nicole knows that feeling is dangerous because it can push her into acting from ego rather than from healing. And the more Nicole thinks, the more the anger rises, tight and sharp, until it becomes difficult to tell whether she is protecting her dignity or preparing to burn the entire landscape down. Ted is not calm either. Shanice feels like an escape, but also like a pressure point. The New Year's kiss makes it impossible to return to the old version of his life, but it also reveals that he is stepping into deeper waters than he is prepared to swim. Shanice wants him to move, to make decisions, to cut the last threads to Nicole. Leslie wants him to doubt, to weaken, to retreat. Nicole's presence beside Carlton becomes a reminder that Ted has lost what he once believed was permanent. Ted is a man who once controlled every angle, yet now he feels trapped between shifting walls. He can negotiate divorce settlements with composure. But he is powerless against the emotional consequences of his choices. And as Leslie's pressure increases, Ted becomes even more vulnerable to manipulation. Because exhaustion makes even the strongest man crave the easiest exit. Leslie sees that exhaustion and treats it like an opening. She knows that a tired man will choose whatever feels simplest. Leslie wants to become that simple option. She doesn't need Ted to declare love immediately. She only needs him to start viewing Shanice as trouble. She will target his responsibility, his fear of judgment, his fragile ego. Leslie will whisper that Shanice is pushing him, pulling him away from stability, taking him into chaos. And if Ted grows weary enough, he will step away from Shanice on his own, believing he made the choice. Leslie understands that men like Ted don't want to be forced. They want to believe they decided. Leslie will shape the situation so Ted can decide to leave Shanice when he does. Leslie will be waiting like safety, even if that safety is nothing more than a trap wrapped in comfort. Shanice feels the tightening noose. She knows Leslie will not stop. She senses Nicole's fury breathing behind the glossy walls of Fairmont Crest. She recognizes that Ted, under pressure, becomes unpredictable. Shanice doesn't want a relationship built on war. She wants hope, not survival tactics. But she also refuses to lose. That New Year's kiss created an unspoken promise. And Shanice does not want to become a brief chapter Ted uses to distract himself from divorce pain. She wants to be chosen fully. That desire makes her push Ted harder toward a clear decision, a new home, a clean break, a real future. Yet the harder she pushes, the more she risks triggering Ted's resistance. Shanice is balancing on a wire, stand still, and Ted might drift backward into his past. Push too much and Ted will feel trapped. Shanice knows it, but she also knows time is a luxury she doesn't have. Every day Ted remains undecided is a day Leslie gains more power, Nicole gains more fury, and Fairmont Crest gains more appetite for scandal. The community itself feels heavier, like fog settling over manicured lawns. Everything looks normal, but underneath, the current is speeding up. Small encounters, polite smiles, and polite greetings become masks over a battlefield being constructed. Nicole walks through elegant halls feeling as though she is entering an invisible courtroom. Ted lives in a constant defensive posture as if one wrong move will be used against him forever. Shanice holds her composure but feels surrounded. Leslie moves like a predator that has already smelled blood, patient but never truly still. And the most dangerous part is no longer who loves whom. The danger is that none of them are acting from pure motives anymore. Nicole doesn't only want happiness, wants proof. Ted doesn't only want love, he wants to protect his image. Shanice doesn't only want a fresh start, wants certainty. Leslie doesn't only want Ted, she wants victory. When love becomes tangled with pride, fear, and territorial obsession, it turns into poison fast. And Fairmont Crest is where poison spreads the quickest. Because everyone lives by appearances and everyone is terrified of losing. Late at night, Nicole stares at her phone and wonders how far she has already traveled from the person she used to be. She tried to move forward. She tried to smile. She tried to let Carlton become her peace. But now the rebellion inside her feels like a storm searching for an exit. She doesn't want to be the woman who was betrayed and stayed quiet. She also doesn't want to become the woman who destroys everything just to feel powerful. She wants something in between, justice without self-destructs. Yet Fairmont Crest offers no middle ground. Ted kissed Shanice. Shanice is pulling Ted into a new life. Leslie is preparing to strike. Nicole has been forced to watch herself get replaced. Everything feels like a chain reaction. Nicole is standing at the point where one small touch will cause collapse. She knows that if she stays silent, she will be crushed slowly by unspoken rage. But if she explodes, she could ruin her own future and drag Carlton into the same dirt she is desperate to escape. Ted, on his side of the fracture, senses Nicole changing in ways he cannot predict. She is no longer the woman who waits quietly for explanations. She has a new partner, a new life, and a colder gaze. Ted feels threatened by that transformation because it removes the last illusion that he still matters in the same way. He hates losing control, and he hates the possibility that Nicole might stop being the gentle one in the story and become the one who fights back. Yet Ted also feels guilt he can't fully silence. If he truly started leaving Nicole long before the divorce became official, then he is now facing consequences. And consequences are what Ted has always tried to negotiate, soften, or avoid. Leslie watches all of it and sees opportunity in Nicole's rage. Leslie doesn't need Nicole to stay calm. Leslie needs Nicole to burn. Because if Nicole erupts, Shanice will suffer, Ted will panic, and their fragile new relationship will weaken. Leslie won't have to destroy them directly. She can let Nicole's pain do the work. Leslie doesn't view Nicole as a person deserving compassion. She sees Nicole as a weapon waiting to be fired. Ted is the prize. Shanice is the obstacle. Nicole is the wall that can be used to crush the enemy. Fairmont Crest remains quiet on the surface. The lighting stays warm. The smiles stay polished. But behind that choreography, locks are shifting. Ted is hunting for a new home as Shanice suggests. Leslie is sharpening her blade with rumors and distorted truth. Shanice is trying to keep Ted from sinking back into the past. Nicole is standing on the edge of a rebellion that could change her life forever. None of them knows who will strike first. None of them knows how this ends. And when Nicole finally lifts her phone, not to call Carlton, not to message Ted, but to do something that could ignite everything, screen flashes with a fresh alert. The kind of information that appears at exactly the wrong moment. It is enough to turn Nicole's anger into a trigger. Enough to convince Leslie this is the perfect time to attack. And enough to make Shanice's control slip. But what makes Nicole go completely still is the sudden realization that if she opens it, it won't only expose Ted, and Shanice could also pull her relationship with Carlton into the mud. With no way out. Con Beyond the Gates CBS spoilers Chien Fantich. Ha Ra Gig Thiet Vathau Luan Vacac Tit Trong Lot Fim. Tigak Nhen QSA Mat Ingui Ham Mi Lao NCM. Uako, Ingui Zem Ko Tha Ko GG Seen Gak Nhsao SDC, Catch Quan Vathu Viev Hun. Hey Bankaeb Con DCC Pin Het Tin TC MGI Va Lot Fim.